It all started on a rainy Friday evening. My wife Laura and I had been married for 7 years. We were both in our early 30s, and despite our best efforts, we hadn't been able to have children. We had tried everything. Fertility treatments, various specialists, even considering adoption, but nothing seemed to work. Laura is beautiful, smart, and ambitious. She's always been the kind of person who knew what she wanted and went after it. I admired that about her. But lately, it seemed like her ambition had turned into dissatisfaction. My job requires a lot of travel, leaving Laura alone more often than not, which has only added to her growing unhappiness. One particularly rough evening, after yet another argument about our inability to conceive, Laura stormed out of the house. She was fuming, her face red with anger and frustration. Her car was in the shop, so she had no choice but to call for an Uber. That's when she met Ethan. He was her driver that night. Ethan was a ruggedly handsome man in his late 30s, with a charming smile that seemed to melt away her frustrations. Laura later told me that he had an aura of confidence and reliability that instantly put her at ease. She was drawn to him, and they struck up a conversation during that first ride. Little did I know that this seemingly innocent encounter would eventually lead to the unraveling of our lives. Over the next few months, Laura started requesting rides more frequently. And by more frequently, I mean she would make up excuses to go out, just so she could call for an Uber, hoping Ethan would be her driver. As fate would have it, their paths crossed often, and each time they did, their connection deepened. Laura would come home from these rides looking lighter, happier even. I chalked it up to her getting some fresh air and clearing her head. I was clueless. I trusted Laura completely, and never suspected that anything was going on. But the truth was, she had found someone who listened to her, someone who made her feel understood and valued, something she felt I hadn't done in a long time. Then one night, after another particularly heated argument, Laura broke down. She told me she felt lonely, unfulfilled. She cried about how our marriage wasn't what she had envisioned, how the constant disappointment was driving her insane. I tried to comfort her. Even to me. That same night, Laura called for an Uber again. Ethan picked her up, and during the ride, she poured her heart out to him. She confessed her fears, her frustrations, and her longing for a baby. Ethan listened, just like he always did, offering her a shoulder to cry on. Laura felt a connection with him that she hadn't felt with me in years. It was then that she made a bold and shocking request. She asked Ethan to help her conceive a child. She told him that she believed I was unfit to be a father because of my constant absences and lack of intimacy. She saw Ethan as the perfect candidate to be the father of her child, someone who was there for her, someone who cared. "Are you serious, Laura?" Ethan asked, stunned by her proposition.
Yes, Ethan. I need this. I can't keep living like this. I want a baby, and I believe you'll be a better father than Tom could ever be,
she pleaded, her eyes filled with desperation. Ethan hesitated. He cared about Laura, but this was a huge decision. However, the bond they had formed made it difficult for him to refuse. After a long silence, he finally agreed, setting into motion a series of events that would change our lives forever. So there it is, the beginning of my nightmare. I had no idea that my wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was planning something so deceitful behind my back. And this was only the start. Little did I know that things were about to get much, much worse. After that fateful night when Laura asked Ethan to help her conceive, their relationship escalated quickly. It was as if a dam had broken, and there was no holding back the flood of emotions and actions that followed. Laura and Ethan began meeting in secret. At first, it was just more frequent Uber rides, but soon they started seeing each other outside of those confines. Laura would make up excuses to go out, sometimes late at night, just to spend time with Ethan. She claimed she needed to clear her head, to get some air, and I believed her. In reality, she was deepening her connection with Ethan. Their conversations grew more intimate, and their bond more undeniable. Ethan became Laura's confidant, her escape from the unhappiness she felt at home. They started meeting at cafes, parks, and eventually more private places. Their relationship was no longer just emotional. It had become physical. They began having sex in his car, in hotel rooms, anywhere they could be alone together. I was completely oblivious. I was busy with work, traveling frequently, and whenever I was home, I tried to make things right between us. But Laura seemed distant, distracted. Our arguments became more frequent, and each one left me feeling more helpless. I couldn't understand what was happening to our marriage. One evening, after yet another argument, Laura told me she needed some fresh air and left the house. She called for an Uber, and of course, Ethan showed up. This time, instead of just talking, they ended up at a secluded spot outside the city. It was here that Laura reiterated her desire for Ethan to help her conceive a child. They sat in the car, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. Laura turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with a mix of desperation and determination.
Ethan, I meant what I said before. I want you to help me have a baby,
she said, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan looked at her, conflicted. He cared about her, but this was a huge step. Laura, this isn't something to take lightly. Are you sure this is what you want?
Yes, Tom and we're not working. We've tried everything, but it's not happening. I need this. I need you.
Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He was torn, but the connection he felt with Laura was undeniable. Okay, he said finally, if this is what you really want, I'll do it. That night, they crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They had sex in the backseat of Ethan's car, the first of many such encounters. Laura felt a rush of emotions. Guilt, excitement, relief. She believed that this was the answer to her problems, that having a baby with Ethan would fill the void in her life. But it wasn't just about the physical act. Laura and Ethan's relationship continued to deepen. They spent more time together, finding comfort and solace in each other's arms. They met in secret, away from prying eyes, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. I remained blissfully unaware of what was going on. Laura became an expert at lying, covering her tracks with elaborate stories and excuses. She would come home late, telling me she had been out with friends or working late. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But the signs were there, and looking back, I can't believe I missed them. Laura's mood swings became more intense. One moment, she would be affectionate and loving. The next, she would be cold and distant. I attributed it to the stress of our situation, but in reality, it was the guilt and conflict eating away at her. She was living a double life, and it was starting to take its toll. Despite the growing tension, Laura and Ethan continued their affair. They met whenever they could, their secret rendezvous becoming more frequent. They were playing a dangerous game, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. So that's where we are. My wife was living a double life, cheating on me with her Uber driver, and I had no idea. She was desperate for a child, and believed that Ethan was the answer to her prayers. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would tear our lives apart. As the months went by, Laura and Ethan's secret affair continued to intensify. They met in hotels, secluded parks, and the backseat of his car, all the while believing they were being careful. Laura's obsession with becoming pregnant grew stronger, and she was convinced that this would solve all her problems. Meanwhile, at home, I started to notice the cracks in Laura's stories. She was more erratic, her lies less coherent. There were more late nights, more sudden errands, and more unexplained absences. I wanted to trust her, to believe that she was just coping with the stress in her own way, but the nagging doubt in my mind wouldn't go away. One night Laura came home particularly late, her clothes disheveled and smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I confronted her, asking where she had been. She spun a tale about a spontaneous girls' night out, complete with details about friends whose names I barely recognized. It was elaborate, too elaborate, and it set off alarms in my head. Laura, I just want to know the truth, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Are you seeing someone else? She looked at me with wide, indignant eyes. How could you even suggest that, Tom, after everything we've been through? I would never do that to you. Her voice rose to a hysterical pitch, and she started crying, accusing me of not trusting her and making her feel like a prisoner in her own home. Her theatrics were convincing, and for a moment, I felt guilty for doubting her. But the doubt didn't go away. It gnawed at me, especially as her behavior became more erratic. She was either overly affectionate or completely cold, and the swings were getting more extreme. I started to notice other things. The way she guarded her phone, the extra charges on our credit card for hotels and fancy dinners that she claimed were for business. It all came to a head one fateful evening. I had returned home early from a business trip, deciding to surprise Laura. When I walked into our house, it was empty. I called her, but she didn't answer. Concerned, I checked her location using a tracking app we had installed for safety reasons. To my shock, she was at a hotel. My heart pounded in my chest as I drove to the hotel. I tried to calm myself, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. But deep down, I knew I was about to uncover something that would change everything. When I arrived at the hotel, I saw Ethan's car in the parking lot. My stomach churned as I approached, every step feeling like I was walking through quicksand. I peered through the window and saw them, Laura and Ethan, locked in a passionate embrace in the back seat. The sight of them together, the betrayal, hit me like a punch to the gut. "Laura, what the hell is going on?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the night air. Laura pulled away from Ethan, her face paling.
Tom, I can explain.
"Explain what? That you're cheating on me with this cab driver?" My voice was filled with fury and betrayal. Ethan tried to speak, but I cut him off. "How could you do this? Laura? After everything we've been through?" She started crying, her hysteria escalating.
You don't understand. Tom, you were never there for me. I was lonely and desperate. I needed someone who was actually present.
The confrontation was heated, with accusations and revelations flying between us. Laura tried to defend herself, but her lies were unraveling fast. She confessed that she had been seeing Ethan for months, that she had asked him to help her conceive because she didn't think I was capable. Each word was a dagger to my heart. Ethan looked ashamed, but he tried to justify his actions. "I care about Laura, Tom. She was in pain, and I wanted to help her." "Help her? By having sex with her behind my back? How does that help anyone?" I was furious, my world collapsing around me. In the days that followed, I moved out of our home. I couldn't bear to be around Laura, couldn't stand the sight of her after everything she had done. I filed for divorce, determined to sever ties with the woman who had shattered my trust. Laura's hysteria and deceitful nature became even more apparent as she tried to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Ethan, caught in the middle, struggled with his own guilt and emotions. He had genuinely cared for Laura, but the reality of their actions weighed heavily on him. He tried to support her, but the strain of the situation began to take its toll. So that's where things stand. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, had been living a double life, cheating on me with her Uber driver, and I had discovered it in the most gut-wrenching way possible. Little did I know, the nightmare was far from over. After confronting Laura and Ethan in the hotel parking lot, the raw betrayal and anger were almost too much to bear. I moved out of our home that very night, unable to be around Laura. Every corner of our house seemed tainted with her lies. I stayed with a friend, trying to sort through my emotions and decide what to do next. Laura, meanwhile, bombarded me with messages and calls. Her tone swung wildly from pleading and apologetic to angry and accusatory. She insisted that she had done it all out of desperation, that I had driven her to this because of my constant absences. She claimed she still loved me and that we could work through it if I just came home and talked to her. I couldn't face her. The thought of sitting across from her, hearing more lies and excuses, made me sick. Instead, I focused on gathering evidence for the divorce. I needed to protect myself and make sure that if it came down to it, I would have the upper hand. I went through our financial records, documenting the unexplained expenses, hotel stays, fancy dinners, and other charges that couldn't be easily explained. I checked our phone records, seeing the frequent calls and texts to Ethan. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Laura's behavior grew more erratic as the days passed. She continued to call and text, her messages becoming more frantic. She showed up at my friend's house several times, banging on the door and demanding to see me. Each time, my friend sent her away, but it was clear she was unraveling. One day, I decided to confront Ethan directly. I needed to hear his side of the story, to understand how this all started. I found him at his usual pickup spot and approached his car. He looked surprised to see me, but he didn't try to run. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with underlying tension. He nodded, gesturing for me to get in the car. We drove to a quiet park and sat in the car, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "I'm sorry, Tom," he began. I never meant for it to go this far. Then why did you do it? I demanded. Why did you sleep with my wife? Why did you agree to help her conceive a child behind my back? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. About Laura. She was in so much pain, and she felt so alone. I thought I was helping her. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing? I repeated, my anger rising. How could you possibly think that sleeping with a married woman was the right thing to do? I know it was wrong, he said quietly, but it wasn't just about the sex. We connected on a deeper level. She needed someone, and I was there. His words stung, but they also brought a strange sense of clarity. Laura had been unhappy for a long time, and I had missed the signs. That didn't excuse what she had done, but it helped me understand how things had gotten to this point. As I left Ethan, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, but also a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and I could finally start to move on. Back at my friend's house, I started drafting the divorce papers. I was determined to end things quickly and cleanly, to sever all ties with Laura. She continued to call and text, but I ignored her, focusing instead on rebuilding my life. But Laura wasn't done. Her desperation grew, and she became more hysterical. She showed up at my workplace, causing a scene and demanding to see me. She threatened to ruin me, to take everything in the divorce if I didn't come back to her. I knew I had to act fast. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce, citing her infidelity and erratic behavior. The evidence I had gathered was overwhelming, and I was confident I would come out on top. The divorce proceedings began, and Laura's lies and manipulations became more desperate. She tried to paint me as an absent and neglectful husband, hoping to gain sympathy and possibly custody of our unborn child, but I was prepared. I had documented her behavior, her deceit, and her affair, presenting a strong case against her. During one of the court hearings, a startling revelation came to light. Laura had been seeing not just Ethan, but several other men as well. Her web of lies was more intricate than anyone had realized, and the truth left everyone reeling. Laura's hysteria and deceitful nature became even more apparent as she tried to navigate the legal battle. She blamed me for everything, claiming that my absences and lack of intimacy had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. But the evidence was clear, and the court saw through her manipulations. The divorce was granted, and I was free from Laura's lies. It was a bittersweet victory, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I vowed to move on, to rebuild and find happiness again, free from the shadows of betrayal. The divorce was granted, but the aftermath was far from over. Laura's hysteria and erratic behavior didn't stop with the legal separation. If anything, it seemed to escalate as she realized the full extent of her losses. Her reputation, her marriage, and the life she had known were crumbling around her, and she lashed out in every direction. One afternoon, I returned to my friend's house to find Laura waiting for me on the porch. Her eyes were wild, her hair disheveled. She looked like a woman on the edge, and it took all my strength not to turn around and leave.
Tom, we need to talk,
she demanded, blocking my way. We have nothing to talk about, Laura, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. It's over. The divorce is finalized. You need to move on.
Move on?
She shrieked, her voice cracking.
You think you can just walk away after everything we've been through? After everything you've done to me?
Everything I've done to you? I repeated, incredulous. You were the one who cheated, who lied, who manipulated everyone around you. You brought this on yourself. Her face contorted with rage.
You drove me to it. You were never there for me. You abandoned me.
I was working, trying to provide for us, for the family we wanted to have. You chose to betray me instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix things. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or another attempt to manipulate me.
I loved you, Tom. I still do. We can make this right. We can still have a family.
There's no we anymore, Laura. It's too late for that. She lunged at me, her hands clawing at my shirt. I pushed her away, my patience finally snapping. You need help, Laura. Please, just get the help you need and leave me alone.
You'll regret this, Tom. I'll make sure of it.
With that, she turned and stormed off, leaving me shaken and exhausted. I hoped that was the last I would see of her, but deep down, I knew she wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, Laura's threats escalated. She sent me dozens of messages, each more unhinged than the last. She accused me of ruining her life, of being a monster. She even threatened to harm herself, but when I called her bluff, she lashed out even harder. I contacted my lawyer and the authorities, documenting every threat and incident. A restraining order was put in place, but Laura was relentless. She showed up at my workplace, my friend's house, even my parents' home. Her behavior was erratic and dangerous, and I feared for my safety. Then one night, the final straw came. I was returning home late from work when I saw a familiar car parked outside my friend's house. It was Ethan's. My heart sank as I approached, and I saw Laura and Ethan inside, engaged in another heated argument. Ethan looked exasperated, while Laura was in full hysterics. As I got closer, I could hear their voices.
You promised you'd help me. Ethan, you said you'd be there for me.
Laura screamed, her voice piercing the night air. I did help you, Laura. I was there for you, but this is too much. You're out of control, Ethan shouted back.
You can't just abandon me like Tom did. I need you.
Laura's voice broke, and she started crying uncontrollably. Ethan looked up and saw me. His expression shifted from frustration to guilt. Tom, I'm sorry. I tried to help her, but she's not well. I know, I said, my voice heavy with resignation. She needs professional help. Ethan, you can't keep enabling her. Laura turned to me, her tear-streaked face filled with anger.
This is all your fault. Tom, you did this to me.
No, Laura, you did this to yourself, I replied, trying to stay calm. You need to get help. She broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan gently guided her into his car, promising to take her to a hospital. As they drove away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over. The nightmare that had consumed my life for the past year was finally coming to an end. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved to a new place, started therapy, and reconnected with friends and family. The scars from Laura's betrayal would take time to heal, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Laura, as far as I knew, was getting the help she needed. I hoped she would find peace and stability. For her sake, and for the sake of the child she was still carrying. Ethan had distanced himself from her, realizing that their relationship was built on a foundation of lies and desperation. As I sat in my new apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that sometimes the worst experiences in life can lead to the most profound growth. I was determined to learn from my past, to be a better person, and to build a future filled with honesty, trust, and love. And so, I closed that painful chapter of my life, ready to move forward into a new, brighter one. After the restraining order and the final confrontation with Laura, my life began to slowly stabilize. The peace I felt was unfamiliar but welcome. I started to see a therapist to help process the trauma and betrayal. Each session helped me understand my own emotions better and made me stronger. Work became my sanctuary. I poured myself into projects, took on new responsibilities, and even considered a promotion that would keep me more grounded and less on the road. My colleagues noticed the change in me. I was more focused, driven, and strangely at peace despite the chaos that had preceded this phase of my life. One evening, as I was catching up on some paperwork at home, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Normally, I would ignore such calls, but something urged me to pick up. Tom, it's Ethan, the voice on the other end said. I felt a wave of mixed emotions. I hadn't spoken to Ethan since that night outside my friend's house. Ethan, what's going on? I asked, wary. I wanted to let you know that Laura has been admitted to a psychiatric facility. She's finally getting the help she needs, he said. His tone was sincere, filled with a relief that mirrored my own. That's good to hear, I replied, not entirely sure how to feel. Is she okay? She's in good hands. It was tough, but I think this is the best thing for her. She was out of control. Tom, I'm sorry for everything. There was a long pause. Thank you for letting me know, I finally said, and thank you for trying to help her. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a while, processing the news. Laura was getting help. Maybe, finally, we could both move on from this nightmare. Weeks turned into months, and life gradually began to feel normal again. I started dating cautiously at first, afraid of getting hurt again. I met a wonderful woman named Sarah. She was kind, understanding, and patient. Everything I needed at that moment. She knew about my past and respected the pace I needed to set. Sarah and I grew closer, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine connection. We spent weekends exploring new places, cooking together, and just enjoying each other's company. She was a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the chaos I had endured with Laura. One afternoon, Sarah and I were walking through a local park when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my lawyer. "Tom, I have some news regarding Laura," he said. My heart sank. "What now? What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "She's filed a motion to contest the divorce settlement. She claims she's in a better mental state and wants to renegotiate the terms." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. "Are you serious? After everything, she still wants to cause trouble?" "I know it's frustrating, but we can handle this. Given her history and the evidence we have, I'm confident we can maintain the original terms," he reassured me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "Okay, let's do whatever we need to do." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Laura, now seemingly more stable, was determined to renegotiate the terms of our divorce. She argued that her mental state at the time had been unstable and that she deserved a fairer settlement now that she was recovering. Despite my initial anger, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. She was trying to rebuild her life too, but I couldn't let my guard down. I had to protect myself. During the hearings, Laura was composed and articulate, a stark contrast to the hysterical woman I had known. She made a compelling case, and while my lawyer was confident, I could see that the judge was considering her arguments seriously. In the end, a compromise was reached. Laura would receive a slightly larger portion of our assets, but I would retain full control of my retirement funds and the house. It wasn't the perfect outcome, but it was one I could live with. The legal battles over, I finally felt a sense of closure. Laura and I were officially done, and I could focus on my future with Sarah. We decided to take a trip together, to get away from everything and just enjoy each other's company. We chose a quiet beach town, far from the memories and the drama. As we walked along the shore, hand in hand, I felt a profound sense of peace. Sarah had been my rock through all of this, and I was grateful for her support. One evening, as we watched the sunset, Sarah turned to me. "Tom, I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. I love you." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "I love you too, Sarah. Thank you for everything." The journey to rebuild my life had been long and painful, but I had come out stronger. With Sarah by my side, I felt ready to face whatever the future held. And so, I closed the chapter on Laura and the chaos she had brought into my life. I was ready to move forward, to build a new life filled with love, trust, and happiness. The trip to the beach town with Sarah was exactly what I needed. It gave me the clarity and peace to fully move on from the chaos Laura had brought into my life. Returning home, I felt more resolved and focused than ever. Sarah and I decided to move in together, taking our relationship to the next level. Our days were filled with laughter, love, and a sense of normalcy that I hadn't experienced in a long time. But as life began to settle, another unexpected event shook things up. One evening, as Sarah and I were preparing dinner, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer it. "Hello, Tom. It's Dr. Patterson from the psychiatric facility where Laura is being treated." My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, doctor, how can I help you?" "I'm calling to inform you that Laura has been making significant progress. She's requested a meeting with you. She says it's important for her recovery." A flood of emotions hit me. The idea of seeing Laura again was daunting, but if it would help her recovery, I felt obligated to consider it. "What does she want to talk about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She mentioned wanting to make amends and to discuss some things that she believes are crucial for her moving forward. "Dr. Patterson replied. I took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll meet her." Sarah was supportive when I told her about the call. "Do what you need to do, Tom. Just remember, you're doing this for closure, not to reopen old wounds." A few days later, I found myself driving to the facility where Laura was being treated. The place was calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the chaos Laura had brought into my life. Dr. Patterson greeted me and led me to a small, private room where Laura was waiting. She looked different, calmer, more composed. Gone was the wild, desperate look I had last seen in her eyes. She stood up when I entered, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, the silence heavy with unspoken words.
Tom, thank you for coming.
She said finally, her voice steady. Laura, I'm here to listen, I replied, taking a seat across from her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly.
I've had a lot of time to think about everything. What I did to you, to us, was unforgivable. I was in a very dark place, and I let my desperation drive me to do terrible things. I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know how truly sorry I am. I was selfish and reckless, and I hurt you in ways I can't even imagine. I've been working hard to understand my actions, to take responsibility for them, and part of that is making amends with you.
I appreciated her words, but I needed more than just an apology. Laura, I'm glad to see you're getting the help you need, but why did you do it? Why Ethan? Why all the lies? She wiped her tears, taking another deep breath.
I was lonely, Tom. You were always away, and I felt abandoned. Ethan was there, and he listened to me. I confused his attention for something more, and once it started, I didn't know how to stop. I was scared and ashamed, so I kept lying to cover it up.
Her honesty hit me hard. I had spent so long resenting her, blaming her for everything, that I hadn't considered how my own actions had contributed to her feelings of isolation. I understand, Laura. I wasn't there for you the way I should have been, but you had other options. You could have talked to me, gone to therapy, anything but what you chose to do. She nodded, her expression filled with regret.
I know. I made the wrong choices, and I'm paying the price for them now. But I want to do better, to be better, for myself, and for the child I'm carrying.
The mention of the child brought a wave of emotion. How is the baby? I asked softly.
Healthy,
She replied, a small smile breaking through her tears.
I'm determined to be a good mother, to provide a stable environment. That's why I needed to see you, to make peace with the past, so I can move forward.
I felt a sense of closure washing over me. This meeting, as painful as it was a necessary step for both of us. I appreciate your honesty, Laura. I really do. I hope you find the peace you're looking for, and that you can provide a good life for your child, I said sincerely. We sat in silence for a few moments, absorbing the weight of our conversation. Then, with a final nod, I stood up to leave. Goodbye, Laura. Take care of yourself.
Goodbye, Tom. Thank you.
As I walked out of the facility, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The past was finally behind me, and I could focus on the future with Sarah. This meeting with Laura had given me the closure I needed, and I was ready to fully embrace my new life. Returning home, I found Sarah waiting for me, her warm smile and open arms welcoming me back. How did it go? She asked, her eyes full of concern. It went well, better than I expected, I replied, pulling her into a hug. I feel like I can finally move on. And with that, we continued building our life together, free from the shadows of the past, looking forward to a future filled with love, trust, and happiness. With the chapter of Laura and the turmoil firmly behind me, Sarah and I embarked on building a new life together. The sense of closure from my meeting with Laura allowed me to open my heart fully to Sarah, and our relationship grew stronger each day. A few months after that pivotal meeting, Sarah and I decided to take another step forward. We found a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, a place that felt like it could truly be our home. Moving in together was an exciting and somewhat nerve-wracking experience, but it felt right. We spent our weekends decorating, making the space our own, and dreaming about our future. One sunny afternoon, as we were unpacking the last of the moving boxes, Sarah turned to me with a serious expression. Tom, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about. My heart skipped a beat, fearing some unexpected complication. What is it, Sarah? She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. I want us to start a family. I know it's a big step, especially after everything you've been through, but I love you, and I want to build a future with you. Her words filled me with a mixture of joy and trepidation. The thought of starting a family was both exhilarating and terrifying, considering my past. But looking into Sarah's eyes, I saw only love and sincerity. She was the person I wanted to spend my life with, and I knew we could face anything together. I want that too, Sarah, I said, my voice steady. I want us to have a family. I'm ready." We embraced, the decision marking the beginning of a new chapter. We started trying for a baby, and as the months passed, our anticipation grew. The journey wasn't without its challenges, but we faced them together, supporting each other every step of the way. Then, one morning, Sarah came to me with a radiant smile and tears in her eyes. She held up a positive pregnancy test. "Tom, we're going to be parents." The news was overwhelming. We hugged, laughed, and cried, filled with a profound sense of happiness and hope for the future. This child represented a fresh start, a symbol of the love and trust we had built together. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, we prepared for the arrival of our baby. We transformed a room into a nursery, filled with soft colors and cheerful decorations. We attended parenting classes and read countless books, wanting to be as ready as possible for this new adventure. During this time, we received occasional updates about Laura from Ethan. She was doing better, focusing on her recovery and preparing for motherhood. It was strange but comforting to know that she was also finding her way forward. Despite everything that had happened, I genuinely wished her well. The day our baby was born was the happiest of my life. Sarah and I welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world, naming her Emily. Holding Emily in my arms for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and responsibility. This tiny human being was our future, a testament to the love Sarah and I shared. As we settled into our new roles as parents, life took on a new rhythm. There were sleepless nights and moments of doubt, but there was also immeasurable joy and fulfillment. Emily's laughter filled our home, her presence bringing us closer together. One evening, as I rocked Emily to sleep, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain and betrayal of the past seemed distant, overshadowed by the love and happiness I had found with Sarah and Emily. I realized that every step, no matter how painful, had led me to this moment of pure contentment. Sarah came into the nursery, wrapping her arms around me. "You're a wonderful father, Tom," she whispered, her eyes filled with love. "And you're a wonderful mother," I replied, kissing her gently. I couldn't ask for a better partner. We stood there together, watching our daughter sleep, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the life we had built. It wasn't perfect, and it hadn't been easy, but it was ours. In the years that followed, our family continued to grow. We had another child, a little boy named Jack, and our home was filled with even more love and laughter. We faced challenges, as all families do, but we faced them together, stronger for the trials we had overcome. Looking back, I saw how far I had come from the dark days of betrayal and heartbreak. Laura's actions had nearly destroyed me, but they had also set me on a path to find true happiness and love with Sarah. It was a journey of pain and growth, of loss and redemption, and I was grateful for every step. As I stood in our backyard one evening, watching Sarah play with Emily and Jack, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was my family, my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And so, the story of betrayal and heartache came to a close, replaced by a new story of love, resilience, and joy. It was a reminder that even the darkest times can lead to the brightest futures, and that true happiness is found in the love and connection we build with those who matter most.